My name is Meg Sloan, and I'll be asking our expert, Nancy Colburn of Engage ADHD Counseling, the questions you sent in. Thank you for participating by sending in your questions. Nancy, thank you so much for donating your time and expertise to our community.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you. So let's get started. The first question I'm going to ask are, what are tips for helping my kids stay calm when they escalate so quickly?
Yeah, that's a tough one because it's so different for each kid. And so is try to find ways to keep them from escalating. A lot of the kids that I work with, we talk about being able to recognize those feelings when they start and then react to them or respond to them in a way that you realize, oh, those feelings are starting to come up. I need to do something about this before they get bigger. And so we kind of have the graphic of a volcano, where you've got the triangle and then there's lava at the bottom and then it builds and builds and builds, and you want to get to the point where you avoid the part where they explode. And so being able to call out those feelings. Hey, what are you feeling right now? Are you angry? Are you frustrated? And then what sorts of ways would you want to respond to those things? Because if they get to the point where they've blown their top, they can't think straight. There's no problem solving going on. There's no learning. There's no talking them through it, right? They're going to have to find a way to calm down before they can go back and take a look at what happened. And so it's really about recognizing those issues before they get too big and then being able to work through that with your kid. If it's especially common, like it happens a lot, then there's some sort of frustration going on there that you need to get to the heart of. It's not that they're doing it just to be difficult. They are frustrated about something. There's something that they can't handle. And so they're letting all that out in their emotions. And I don't know if I said this in the video, but these kids are 2 to 3 years behind their peers in terms of their ability to manage that. And so if they're 10 years old, they're probably responding with an emotional regulation of more like an 8 or a 7 year old. And you would give a 7 or 8 year old a lot more support than you would a 10 year old. So you have to think of them as younger than they are because that emotional regulation is difficult until they get much, much older and have more skills in their toolbox, essentially, to be able to recognize it and manage it in the moment. And then if they are to the point where they've just exploded, then you have to leave them to be able to calm down, not leave them in like the physical sense necessarily. You want to make sure they're safe, but you're not going to be able to reason through that. You've got to let them calm down first. And what are those ways that work for them? And sometimes that's a conversation that you can have when they are calm. Hey, when you got upset the other day, what do you think might have helped for you to calm down? Would you want to go spend time in your room, or would you want to have a nice soft beanbag somewhere where you can just flop yourself down and read a book or listen to music? What would be helpful to you? And so sometimes they don't know, right? And so it's just a
Yeah.
matter of what is that feeling that you were feeling in that moment, and how can we work on finding ways to understand that that feeling's starting to come up, and then how can we manage it before it gets too big?
Yeah. It's hard even for adults to do
Oh
sometimes.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's about being aware, self-aware enough to be able to notice, "Oh, I'm getting frustrated. I've got to take a break, or I've got to
Mhm.
get something to drink," or whatever it might need to be, especially a physical need. Like, have they eaten lately? Did they not
Yeah.
get enough sleep last night? Did somebody do something that made them upset? What's going on physically that you can address in the moment and then work on being able to calm down in other ways. And of course, that's like deep breathing and that sort of thing that a lot of kids resist, but it resets their nervous system enough so that they can start to calm down. And so modeling that can be helpful too. Just, oh, I need to take a break a second and just, okay. So
And
you
I,
have to stay calm.
yeah, and actually, I'm going to go to the next question because you mentioned about kids resisting, which I feel happens a lot in my own children.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go to this question of, how do you deal with a kid who is very stubborn and resistant to help? And I think I don't know. Sometimes I feel like in my own kids, it's because I'm the mother. But
Mhm.
but I mean, is there a way that you can advise parents to help a kid who is resistant to help, who is resistant to trying, techniques?
Yeah, I have one of those kids. So, I've learned a lot of that the hard way myself. Um, it's, sometimes, especially even when I'm coaching a kid like that, sometimes I'll just say, "Well, what if you could make that easier? What if it could be different than the way it is now?" Growth mindset, fixed mindset. Sometimes they think, and this is common, like with ADHD kids, they think it's always been that way, and that's the way it always will be, and I can't
Mhm.
change it.
Yeah.
And my job as their coach is to help them see where they could actually change it if they flip their thinking. And
Mhm.
so sometimes if you hear enough of a phrase like, I can't do math, I'm terrible at it. Okay, well, what part of math are you having trouble with? Because you've done math for all these years and you know all that other math, and now this is new math and it's hard. And so, what part of it is hard right now? I think it's just a matter of just learning it, and you can get through that, and then you'll be good at it at some point. And so that's a growth mindset really, is just like, well, what about it is hard right now? And then think about it in a couple of days, you might actually have this nailed, and then the next part will be a little bit difficult and you'll get through that too. A lot of it, that frustration about not wanting help, is not wanting to deal with the discomfort of being in that moment where they can't figure it out or they can't do it or they don't have enough tools or something's in their way. It's a barrier. And so sometimes with kids, I just ask them, well, if you can think about this as a barrier, what sorts of things would you want to take out of your way or use to take this out of your way in order to get to that next step that you need to get to? And what if you could do that? And so then they start to think about it a little bit. And then with enough other questions, they eventually realize, oh, kind of like the rumination comment, that sometimes they think that they can't change a situation. So they spend a lot of time thinking all these negative thoughts about it. And then they can't problem solve again because they're overwhelmed by all the negative thoughts. And so if they can think of it as, this is just a rock in my road. How can I get past this? How would I want to move the rock? And then move forward in a different way. What if you could make that different? What if you could figure out how to make that better? And there's so many strategies and tools and structure and systems to be able to do that. And that's what
Yeah.
I do, is help them figure out what specifically works for them.
Mhm.
And especially as a parent, it's really hard to get them to think that way. But just a simple, what if you could make that better? What if you could make it different? What would you do differently? Might
Yeah.
get them thinking.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like just picturing my children, and I guess you have to catch them when they're not escalated, because
Yes.
just picturing my children, I'd be like, it'll never change. It's always going to be
Yeah.
hard, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
especially when they are overwhelmed, they're not going to be able to problem solve in that moment. But you could go back later and you go, no, I had a thought about this. What
mhm.
do you think if you tried this? It's just a thought. It's your decision, but
Yeah.
it's just a thought that I had. Maybe you can think about it and come up with something better. Just planting a seed, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I know. Or I think of it as like throwing pebbles into a pond, and hopefully something will ripple
Oh, I
and when
know.
they need it. But
Yes. Yeah, it's so common that it takes a while to for that to make the impact that it needs to make. It might need to be, maybe you say it a couple more times and then suddenly it makes sense. Oh, that's what you meant by that. I see. Now I can try it.
yeah. Well, I've actually heard
Yeah.
other people give my children the same advice that I've been
Yeah.
giving them,
Uh-huh.
and they'll be like, "Mom, so and so said this," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's great." But I'm like, in my mind, I'm thinking, "That's exactly what I've been saying for the past 20." No, they're not 20 yet,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah.
feels like 20 years.
I know. But you can't say it
No.
because then you'll kind of just break that all apart. But a
Yeah.
lot of times I can say it
Mhm.
and get through because I'm not mom.
Yeah.
Although I had a client yesterday or a couple days ago tell me, "You sound just like my mom."
Yeah.
Like, well, she was probably right, don't you think? Yes.
All right,
Wow.
let me go to the next question. So this came from a viewer who has multiple kids, with executive functioning issues. And what is a good way to keep organized with which kid needs which supports? And then I'm going to tag on to that, and what if the parent, him or herself struggles with executive functioning themselves? Like,
Yeah, I would start there. What, as a parent with ADHD, do you think you can do? What is the simplest way, the thing that you will be able to keep track of? One thing that I was told by a coach way back 10 years ago when I first started doing this, figuring out ADHD for my kid, was I was told start a binder. And at the time, of course, 10 years ago, that wasn't a digital one, that was on paper. And so
uh,
I made a nice thick one because I wanted it to extend all of his years. And I kept everything, all of the paperwork that the IEP 504 generated, notes from teachers, samples of his work, everything that I could think of that would demonstrate a record of performance or a record of challenges or issues that were going on. And so I kept that binder, but I also eventually then, as things became digital, now I still have a folder that has my kid's name on it, and all of his IEPs are in there, and any emails that came from the teachers are in there. And it's just the easiest way for me to go, look, oh, I need the IEP from 2 years ago.
mhm,
Click on it and see what it is. But when you walk into those IEP meetings with your binder, you look like you know what you're doing and you are organized and you have it under control. And that's really the best way to make an impact too at the school, is to walk in there looking like you are confident and you've got the info. And if you need to prove your point, you've got the document to share. Like even just keeping the grade uh, report cards in there,
mhm.
punching at the 3 holes and sticking it in there. It's whatever is the simplest way for you to manage it, because you do need to remember, what does each kid need? They all have different challenges and have different requirements and support. Even like some kids are better about being their own self-advocate and they don't need as much of your support, but a younger kid will need more of your support and you'll need to be more involved. Eventually then your kid can take that on themselves. Once they get to middle school and high school, they should be part of that process and know what that binder looks like and have those examples in there. But whatever works for the parent that they know that they will follow up on, something as simple as possible that they will be consistent about using.
Yeah. All right. And then another question we got was, I'm looking for some tricks to help my 12-and-a-half-year-old daughter identified with ADHD, inattentive, manage her time. And I think this is, this mom, even though timers are set, this mom ends up having to be the one that gives the reminders. And so, yeah. And what would you suggest to that mom? And I'm that mom too.
Yeah, so was I. I mean, at this point, my son's 20, he's on his own, but
Uh,
um,
Congratulations.
yeah, phew, I got that far. Um, Yeah, so one thing that we always say is externalize time. So have a big clock on your wall, an analog clock, so that it's easy to see. Um, so let's say, well, it's 20 after 4 right now, and you need to be somewhere by 4:30. I see that it's 4:20, and I know when 4:30 is. I've got 10 minutes.
Mhm.
And so having it be more visible around the house can be helpful. I watched a webinar the other day with Dr. Ari Tuckman, who said that a lot of his clients, and mine do as well, say the timers just don't work for me. And he said the timer worked just fine. The
Yeah.
timer did what it was supposed to. It reminded you, you just didn't follow through. You ignored it or didn't take the action that you intended to take. And so when you set that timer, you almost have to say, when this timer goes off, I'm going to do X. And
Mhm.
then you have to follow through for it to work. The title of his webinar was how to really get or actually get things done. I'm like, oh, good, I'm going to learn the right
Yeah.
thing here. And there's no magic in it. There's just, you just set up the system and you follow the system and you do it. And you're just going to have to be consistent, but also intentional. Like what do I want to be able to accomplish? And then set that goal and create those habits and just follow through as much as you can. But externalizing time makes a big difference. And right now, the mom who is acting as the timer is taking away the child's ability to actually be successful with that. And so when they set the timer and the child ignores it, and then the mom comes in and says, your timer went off, the child isn't working with the timer, the child's waiting for the mom.
Yeah.
And so you almost have to take yourself out of that. And then what potentially is the outcome of that? It's
Yeah.
kind of a natural consequence sometimes. Maybe now you're late. Do you want to be late or do you want to be on time? And then work backwards from that. What time do we
Yeah.
have to leave in order to get to the place we need to be by the time we need to be there? And then what steps do you have to take? And at what time do you want to get out of here so that you don't have to feel so chaotic? And so you almost have to walk through that sometimes. If you want them to be, if you want them to be out the door at a certain time, what are the steps? And ask them, don't tell them, ask them, tell me what
Yeah.
things you want to do before we leave so that you know what it is that you have to do. And instead of reminding them, flip it around. What do you need to do right now in order for us to be able to leave? What do you think you need to get done yet? So that it forces them to think about it instead of just waiting for you to tell them. And when you're telling them, they're doing 4 other things. So it goes in this ear and out that one.
Yeah. 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 I guess I think the thing that I find so frustrating is that I feel like I'm the one feeling the, getting the consequences of them ignoring, not necessarily,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
getting
but
the
yeah.
consequences. And
I mean, we've all probably had or heard of a kid who is going to school in their jammies because they didn't get
yes,
dressed, right?
yes, yes,
And for
yes.
some kids, that works. Like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
never going to school in my jammies again, or I don't care, that was fun.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to say, but in that case, then maybe there's an incentive that you can provide. Maybe there's a reward. And I even had a client the other day say, well, I don't want to set up rewards for myself because I feel like I'll rely on that. I'm like, your brain needs that. That's what it gets your brain going and creates that dopamine and gets that motivation up. That's how your brain works. So you need to create those rewards. And so now her head's spinning like, oh, what rewards can I make for myself? And so, yeah, in that situation, when she does respond to the timer, that's awesome. I'm so excited that you did that and that you followed through. Now we can leave on time. So there's the cue, the timer, and then that triggers a response, which is get up and go get your stuff. And then that's the behavior. And then the reward is we're leaving on time and everyone's calm and happy. And here's a snack that's ready for you.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes to be able to inspire them to be able to follow through with that action, and can become a habit if they set the timer, they'd make the response, and then they set up a reward.
Great. And then I have another question. So how do I support my child in attending to information? He doesn't often know what's going on in school, and this, I guess, this parent wrote, I feel as soon as I have spoken 3 words, my son's attention wanders,
Mm-hmm.
especially if it's not an interesting topic,
Right.
or even if sometimes, even if it is an interesting topic.
Yeah.
How can you support a kid who has so many more interesting things going on in his mind to get him to attend, so then he doesn't get stressed out um, when he doesn't know what's going on?
Yeah. And that's where the collaborative problem solving strategy can work really well with that. And so ask for, I need 10 minutes of your time. Can we do that now? Or do you want to do that in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever it is? Chances are they'll want to put it off.
Yeah.
And you say, okay, I'm going to come back here in 15 minutes and you need to be ready because that's the expectation right now. And then we're going to talk about whatever it is, getting your room cleaned up. Maybe it's boring, but it needs to be done because grandma's coming and grandma's going to stay in his room.
Mhm.
And so you start you get to 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, and you sit down and you go, okay, here's our discussion about getting your room picked up. And here are a couple of the key points that I want to make in this time frame. We're only going to talk about this for 10 minutes, and then we're going to need to follow through with some action on this. And I want your thoughts. And maybe you have to tap them on the shoulder or something to get their attention. But it's a matter of working with them and having them give you feedback at the same time. You come up with the thing that works for both of you so that there's some action that will happen, not just I'll do it later.
Mhm.
And so, which is often very common.
Oh, yeah.
But maybe you have a piece of paper and you write it down, or a whiteboard, and you both write things down on either the paper or the whiteboard, so that there's an activity that's part of that process, that sort of that engagement. And then you have the timer that limits it, so then they know there's an end.
Yeah.
And so you have that expectation. After 10 minutes, we might take a second or two or eight to follow up and wrap this up, but we are going to only talk for 10 minutes and then we're going to stop. So it's okay. You don't have to feel like we're going to spend an hour on this. You can do anything for 10 minutes, so let's go. And then getting them engaged as much as possible and making eye contact, and making it fun too, because sometimes gamification is part of that motivation piece that gets them more excited about it, and setting up the reward too. Like, grandma's coming tomorrow and we need to get this cleaned up for her. And when we get it all cleaned up, then maybe we can go get ice cream or something. Doesn't
Mhm.
have to be big, it can be something small, but we've got to do this because grandma's coming and we need it to look good for her. So you kind of want to explain, here's the issue, here's why we have to do this, and why there's a time frame involved. And then when we're done, we'll kind of celebrate the hard work that we had. But even for like a little kid, like, let's pick up all the blue things, or let's just pick up all the books, or let's pick up all the dishes, or whatever it is, breaking it down into something smaller so that they aren't overwhelmed by the idea of going in and cleaning up the room, because it's a big project, right? And so you
Yeah.
have to break it down into something small that they can help with. But even a teenager is going to struggle with that if their room
Mhm.
is really a disaster, or even if it's not,
Uh-huh.
right? Like, they find it boring. They are
Mhm.
not interested. It's tedious. It's frustrating that they have to spend time on it when there are more interesting things to do. But
Yes.
if you can go help them, but maybe you put on music, like you say, okay, you choose the music, I'll listen to whatever you want. And sometimes that can be something you may not want to listen to, but they get to listen to it, right? So there's an
Yeah.
incentive there. Whatever it takes to make it kind of appealing, but also that there's a time limit on it. Like, we'll just work on this for 20 minutes and you can go play, or then I'll work on it for 20 minutes and you can come back. Whatever it takes to fill in the pieces that they'll respond to, and then making it quick and easy so that they don't get overwhelmed or frustrated or bored or whatever, that um, that makes them not want to participate.
Yeah, I really liked how you mentioned earlier that, that their brains need that reward,
Yeah,
need that, I mean, physically need to be able to create the dopamine for getting things done. And I think that's hard to remember sometimes, because
yeah,
you're like, I just want you to just do this thing.
I
And you
know.
forget as a parent, like, wait, this is like a
Yeah,
bigger push for these kids than,
yeah, yeah, because they physically do not produce as much dopamine as a neurotypical person does.
Mhm.
And so it takes a lot more of their energy and creativity and whatever other strengths they have to be able to create enough of that reward or instigation, or the dopamine, or something that makes them inspired to go do the thing. They have to build up a lot of dopamine. They start with a deficit. So you have to take that into account and be patient with that, and not just get frustrated that they aren't there yet, because they
Yeah.
just don't have it to begin with.
Yeah.
So you as a parent, especially a neurotypical parent, have to have some understanding of that and some patience and lots and lots and lots of creativity.
Yeah.
come up with something almost every hour of every day. I still remember like all the charts and everything that we used to come up with, and I look back
Mm,
at that now and go, "Oh, that was way too much."
yeah. Oh
Keep
my
it
goodness.
simple.
I just want to ask one more question because you brought it up again this time, and I'm still curious about what you mean by rumination, that you
Oh yeah.
help your clients with rumination.
Yeah, so this is very common with ADHD people, but also people with anxiety, depression, because that rumination is a constant flow of negative thoughts. And what we say is it's your brain entertaining itself at your own expense. And so something happens. It can be whatever the trigger is, can be like an interaction with another person, or it can be something that happened that is bothering you, or it could be just your present mood.
Mhm.
Um, Lots of different triggers for that, but then it creates a pattern of negative thinking. And so that negative thinking starts up in your brain. Your brain's kind of bored and it wants something to do. And so it picks that up and then starts flying down the road with all these negative thoughts. And it could be like, oh, why did she say that? Or why did I say that? Or how did I do that? Why did I do that? I'm so
Mhm.
stupid. You know, all of those things that they're telling themselves, all these negative thoughts about whatever it was that happened, it won't stop.
Mhm.
And a lot of people with the propensity for that have a really hard time stopping that. And then it creates all of these other negative feelings in their bodies and they just can't get past it. And so recognizing that that's what it is. And I mean, rumination is kind of a big word. So a lot of times when I bring it up with clients, they're not exactly sure what it means,
Mhm.
but it's just that negative flow of thoughts that you just can't get rid of. And so you have to stop and recognize it. Oh, I'm ruminating again.
Mhm.
I've got to realize I'm ruminating and do something different. So, like a client of mine was telling me about a situation in college. She's a college student, and a lot of really crazy stuff had been happening over the course of a couple of months, and it was starting to get really frustrating. And it was to the point one day where she was saying, "Well, this isn't fair, and why did this happen to me? And it's out of my control, and this didn't work." And I stopped her and said, "You are ruminating." And she's like, "No, that's not rumination." Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's out of your control. It's not fair. That's another trigger. It's
Yeah.
not fair. Why did this happen to me? And that becomes a ruminating pattern as well. And so that it helped her realize, oh, it's just a different form of ruminating, which she's already become an expert at in other parts of her life. And so
Uh-huh.
that's a pattern that we're trying to change because that can create a lot more of the negative feelings that can lead to anxiety and depression. And you want to avoid that, especially if
Mhm.
they already have a propensity for that, because we know that about half of people with ADHD can often develop other issues like anxiety or depression. And so that contributes to that negative pattern of thinking. And so you have to break that. You have to acknowledge it. This is rumination. This is not good for my brain. This is not good for me. I'm going to do something else. And so
Mhm.
that could be I'm going to go call a friend, or I'm going to go watch a funny video, or I'm going to go
Mhm.
pet my dog or play with my dog, or it could be lots of other things. I'm going to go cook, make
Yeah.
cookies, something that you like to do or that you
Mhm.
enjoy doing. I'm going to go read a book, whatever it is that you can be deliberate about doing in order to stop the pattern, the negative thinking.
Mhm.
And one video I was watching said singing. If you sang a song, that would stop the negative thinking. And
Hmm.
it's so true. It really does
Yeah.
work.
Well, it makes
And
sense. It has the
so,
deep breathing and everything already
yeah,
built in, and the
yeah.
distraction of a favorite song. And so, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, even this girl, like I said, well, what about because she loves music? Well, what about like a playlist of some sort? And she said she actually does that on the way home from school when she's
Mhm.
walking home from class. She has this playlist, and by the time she gets home, she's calmer.
Nice.
So she's because she's kind of singing along or thinking about the music or
Mhm.
something about it creates that mental break for her that gets her
Mhm.
out of that ruminating pattern. And so so it's successful for her. And
Yeah.
as she recognizes it and does a better job of that, recognizing it and stopping it, it's something that is less likely for her brain to go to when
Mhm.
things become overwhelming. So it's often about something happened, like I said, or just feeling like, oh, everything's terrible. But it can be um, a way to break that pattern, that negative pattern. You want it to flip to a positive pattern instead.
Mm.
I can handle this. I've got this. I'm going to go sing a song. I'm going to go play, do something nice for myself, and then I will feel better. And that's much more productive because you can't be productive when you're ruminating. You're not problem solving. You're
Mhm.
just, circling.
Great. All
So,
right.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to help us and
Yeah,
doing
sure.
this for us. This has been really wonderful, and we
Yeah.
all appreciate you.
Yeah, I love to. I mean, we have our East Side Parents of ADD,
Yes.
ADHD Kids Facebook page. So happy to have people join that. And we are trying to get back on track with doing our parent summits. We
Mhm.
just did one in October, and that was awesome. And then, of course, my coaching, I love it. I'm having so
Mhm.
much fun helping people with ADHD. So
Well,
it's my world now at this point.
we're lucky to have you here here. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to help.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.